Hello, and welcome to Ethanol Producer Magazine podcast. This is Katie Schroeder, staff writer with Ethanol Producer Magazine. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Dr. B.J. Johnson, CEO and co-founder of ClearFlame Engine Technologies, a startup dedicated to the development of net zero engine technology for heavy-duty applications, such as long-haul trucking, agriculture, and power generation. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Katie.
Yes, absolutely. So just to start us off, can you tell me a little bit about how ClearFlame Technologies works and how you guys got started?
Yeah, so taking the how does it work question first, what we do is we modify a diesel engine, changing about 10 to 15% of its parts. We can do that as both a new manufacturer product, also as an in-field retrofit of an existing diesel engine. But with our changes, we enable that diesel engine to maintain all of its performance and practicality benefits, its efficiency, its torque, its power, its demand response, but make it fuel agnostic so it can deliver all of that economic value and commercial value, but using a fuel like ethanol, which is not only significantly cheaper than diesel, it is also significantly cleaner burning, both in terms of greenhouse gases and criteria pollution, soot and smog. The how the technology came about, it was initially some research my co-founder Julie and I had done together at Stanford. We started the company because we wanted to figure out a way to drive down the carbon intensity of these really commercially important sectors, things like trucking and agriculture. But we knew that the electric vehicle technology that was being developed was not particularly well suited for some of those applications, and we wanted to find a complementary solution, a way to bring the cost-effective sustainability that people in those sectors want, but in a way that doesn't compromise their ability to get their jobs done. And that was the original thesis behind ClearFlame.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really exciting. So could you tell me a little bit about your about the significance of your recent announcement, somewhat recent, within the last couple of months, of a first fleet partner for a Class 8 truck running on 100% ethanol?
Absolutely. That was a major step change for us as a company because effectively it proves that it's real. We've been developing the technology in the right way, doing a lot of engine test stand testing, doing our own internal testing on the trucks that we've been driving, but there's still no substitute for getting your product, out in the hands of customers. And Bex was gracious enough to do that for us, to be an early test partner, knowing it was an alpha pilot demonstration and that we're still in the technology development process, but getting their immediate feedback, letting us know what's working well, what isn't working well, what we can continue to improve, and really make this product as compelling as possible for the broader market out there, but also having a great early partner in Bex that's willing to be an evangelist and tell others about what we're trying to develop together.
Yeah, for sure. So, could you talk about how the sale of 100% ethanol without blending impacts greenhouse gas reduction goals?
Of course. So your average, U.S. corn ethanol is going to offer you about a 45 to 50% reduction in life cycle CO2 compared to petroleum diesel. So, you could get those benefits from ethanol if you were to blend it with gasoline as well. But if you're looking to maximize the economic and environmental benefit, you might as well maximize the ethanol content, run it as more or less pure ethanol, E98. And that's one of the reasons why these early partners are excited to test and adopt ClearFlame. They're not only maximizing their greenhouse gas reductions because they're not requiring any gasoline blending, they're also maximizing their cost savings because the economic value of ethanol is now getting split directly between the producer and the user and not necessarily a middleman to run the blending process.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So could you explain how ClearFlame solution compares to other zero emissions solutions being touted on in the market, such as electrification and fuel cells?
Of course, and I would start by pointing out, ClearFlame is not a zero emissions solution in the sense that the market tends to use it, electrification and fuel cells. This is an engine and it has a tailpipe. I think what's really important in the question, how does this compare? You have to ask yourself, what are you trying to compare? When people say zero emission solutions, they really mean criteria pollution. There is no soot or smog that is coming out of those trucks. And that's really important in some polluted urban areas. Think a vehicle that's running around the port of Long Beach, idling a lot, never going very far. When it does go someplace, it's only going 70 miles in LA traffic. That's an area where running an electric vehicle works really well because you protect the local community from any sort of air quality issues.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that said, that's powerful enough that you could maybe want to argue for that solution, even if that electricity was coming from a coal power plant. And that goes back to the, I think, better nuance in what the word zero emissions mean. If we're talking about greenhouse gases, if we're talking about carbon, then nothing is zero emissions right now. That 45 to 50% reduction in CO2 that I talked about for ethanol, an EV only offers about a 35 to 40% reduction based on the average electrical grid. And I don't mean that as a knock on EVs, but we need more nuance in the discussion. And just like replacing gasoline cars with EVs and decarbonizing the grid in parallel is important, there is just as much potential on the combustion side, on the ethanol side, to replace diesel with ethanol and then drive down ethanol's carbon intensity in parallel. And still doing so while doing really well on all of the true criteria pollution emissions as well, the soot and the smog. This is going to make air quality better in urban areas, even if it's not a true zero emission solution. And so I really do think it is the best of both worlds in many of these applications, especially where EV is farther from market reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So can you talk to us about when ClearFlame's technology is anticipated to be commercially available?
Sure. So we have started testing, as you know, this year. We have a long slew of pilots that are lined up next year. The commercially available, that really just depends on regulatory approval. So we are starting to work with EPA to do the approval process. It's a lot of data collection, as it should be. And we expect to have that done by the end of 2023. So, we can start taking orders now, but realistically, probably, Q1, Q2 of next year as we kind of start expanded fleet pilot plans. But we'll be able to deliver on those orders post EPA approval, which basically means the start of 2024.
Wow, that's really exciting. That's coming up soon. So what is on for sure? So what is on the horizon for both long-haul trucking and agriculture applications?
So for trucking, it's largely what I just described. It's getting out there in the pilot demonstrations. These kind of first set of pilots we're doing are to, again, get customer feedback, what could be improved to make sure we're developing the product the right way. Then we'll be going back to those partners and kind of figuring out who wants to put in orders. Getting some orders in advance of that commercial launch you just asked about is important because it helps show the traction that ClearFlame is getting in the market. It's also helpful from a priority perspective. We'll, with the supply chains and kind of scale up, we'll probably only produce a few hundred units in 2024. So knowing exactly who that's going to go to sooner than later is important. For agriculture, that's largely driven through our partnership with John Deere. We are looking to do a field demo of our technology some point in one of their pieces of farm equipment early next year. That will likely be a behind the curtain demo. We'll use a test field, but then using kind of 2024 to really explore how we want to scale up from those early tests. And the product you didn't ask about but mentioned earlier, the power generators. We have a huge range of pilots that are set up with utilities right now, also private sector customers, auto dealerships, people tied to EV charging. We're going to be starting some pilots with them as well, either late this year or early next year, depending on the customer we're talking about.
That's awesome. That's really exciting. So if I could throw in another question here,
please,
kind of on the power generator side, could you tell me a little bit more about kind of the power generator side of things and what the development of that technology has looked like for you guys?
Of course. So I think really kind of starting with the most important point, because you asked about development of the technology, it's actually really redundant for ClearFlame. Okay. That actually is one of the platform benefits of being a diesel engine technology. It's effectively we're taking the same engines that we're putting into trucks and also putting them into generators. And so from ClearFlame's perspective, we have to know how the technology works on an engine. And then we partner with one person that specializes in integrating in trucks, another that specializes in integrating in gensets. But that's existing core competency that a lot of businesses have, how to install what amounts to a diesel engine in every sense of the word but the fuel, how to install it in a piece of equipment. The end use case, what it means in the market is a lot more broad. Emergency backup diesel generators are everywhere, these days. Most large buildings have them for when the grid goes down. And they're so dirty that right now you can only use them for true emergencies. One of the visions we have for ClearFlame is if you could run a diesel genset on a clean burning fuel, you would take an asset that everyone has to own for emergency purposes and give it a lot more economic value. You can use it for peak shaving to lower your utility bill. You can use it for demand response to support the utility when there's an imbalance in load requirements on the grid. You can use it for EV charging. There's a lot more that you could do with a diesel genset if it was decoupled from the challenges of petroleum diesel fuel, and that's exactly what we do.
That is awesome. That's really exciting. So I think this will be probably my last question. But I believe you mentioned earlier that the technology is fuel agnostic, but these initial applications focus on ethanol as the fuel of choice. Could you kind of help us understand why ethanol offers the best optionality right now and why it was chosen?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd use the word optionality. The why it was chosen is because it's really the only option. This country only has 3 fuels at scale that are nationally distributed. It is gasoline, diesel, and ethanol. So if your goal is to drive down greenhouse gas emissions, you really only have one choice, and we're lucky that one choice is already cost effective. Compared to diesel, so that's not coming at an economic compromise. If you look at where you could expand ClearFlame technology, then we're going to go to the regions where there's already robust alternative fuel infrastructure. Brazil certainly comes to mind as well. But then you asked about the fuel agnostic nature. Some countries long term, they might not choose to go the ethanol route. They might use methanol. They might use ammonia. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know where that world is going, but I can tell you it'll work in our engine. And I think that's where the optionality comes in, that we enable everything. We enable ethanol to be everything it can be in terms of its economic and environmental potential. But we also give the flexibility for maybe occasionally ethanol is not the best solution, and there are other fuels that will work there too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can see how the flexibility aspect would be really valuable in this market. Did you have any final thoughts or things you'd like to share before we go?
I think I would love to conclude on the point that I usually do, which is, you asked earlier about how does this compare against zero emission solutions, and the answer of we need to talk more realistically about zero emissions, what it means. I think that's true, but I also wouldn't want anyone to take that as a comment that there is something wrong with EVs and fuel cells. I really do think this is all very complementary. Where EVs do well, that tends to be ClearFlame's weakest case, and vice versa. And if we're serious about meeting our national and international climate goals in a way that allows our economies to still grow and scale the way they need to, we need to be talking about complementary solutions. And it's not ClearFlame versus EV or fuel cell. It is ClearFlame versus diesel, EV versus diesel, fuel cell versus diesel. And maybe all working together, we can solve that problem. But we need to be pitching ourselves as where we're better than the status quo and why, less about each other.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you so much for your time, BJ. Really appreciate speaking with you.
Thank you, Katie.